So, how does dialing in the sales copy help replace social media marketing?
So I've got in the back of my mind, it seems like if we do a bunch of work to bring traffic to our pages, but our pages are not converting, then that time was sort of wasted. So in my head, it just makes a lot of sense to fix the sales funnel first. And for me, this comes from a place of pain in the sense that I ran after an engineering career. I ran a sales operations function at an engineering firm where I was working, so it's super important in my mind to have the sales funnel locked in first, because then when we flow traffic to the funnel, whether it's through collaborations or social, either way, we get to close that traffic. And then that gives us the option to pop off of social if we want to. And if we want to drive more leads, great, but we're not forced into a specific category of leads. And it's not about just loads and loads and loads of traffic. We can focus first on quality, and then if we have quantity, seems like that would be a great mix.
I love that quality over quantity because I think a lot of times we think, oh, our email list needs to be huge, our followers need to be a ton, but you only need a certain handful of right leads in order to have a really successful business. Now, I know that your work emphasizes the power of storytelling in marketing. You talk a little bit about the difference between the outer narrative and the inner narrative. Can you break that down for us with an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. So when people say narrative, I think that we can sort of conflate two things. And so when I'm talking about an outer narrative, I'm talking about what we all think of as the story arc. What is the journey that we're taking a client through from high in our funnel to low in our funnel? What are the connective pieces? But for the outer narrative to make any sense or have context, we're going to need an inner narrative. And so what I mean by that, because in my head I can see these as concentric circles, may not work for the listeners, but that's where this comes from. And the inner narrative is really around holding attention in the meantime. So how do we have little micro stories, if you like? And to me, a story is just building and releasing tension. So there's the high level arc, the outer, and then there's this inner section where on the page, inside of a specific paragraph, we're going to be building and releasing tension along the way. And so when I hear the word narrative, I sort of think of it in two different contexts. The high level map, where are we going? But then how do I keep or hold, excuse me, attention between the milestones on that map?
That makes a lot of sense. So I know that when it comes to storytelling, we kind of need to know what our prospects are thinking too.
Mm.
And there are some different myths or challenges that they're thinking through. What are some of those myths and how do they affect a buyer's decision making process?
Yeah, right. So, and I think that we're all working on this. So, if we can look internally and admit that there are probably things that are untrue that we're believing about ourselves or our problems, it makes it a little easier to look through the eyes of our prospects. So, this can be challenging, but I like to think of these things in three different categories. So, one, there may be a myth around limited possibilities. For example, the ordinary world is all there is. There's just nothing else past it. A second myth that someone might believe about their situation is that there is limited access. There is more out there, but it's not for me. And then a third way to think about this problem would be around limited resources. There's more out there. It's for me, but I'm not going to have the money, or maybe the program's not going to work and there's not going to be actual ROI at the end of it. And so those would be limited possibilities, limited access, and limited resources are three ways that people can think about identifying the myth their prospect might be believing.
Mm. So, can you kind of give me an example? Maybe we could even go through like, I'm a runner, so we could go in that runner realm.
Okay.
Maybe there's a program for marathon training to beat your best marathon time and, hit a Boston Marathon qualifying time, whatever it is. Like,
Hmm.
what are some myths that we would be thinking about that prospect we need to help them overcome those limiting beliefs?
First of all, I love having the backdrop of an actual coaching business. All right, Gabe. So you're a marathon. You are a marathoner, and so therefore now we have Gabe the marathon coach, and this is perfect. So a limited possibilities myth that a marathon runner might have is I just don't have the body type to run faster. Like this
Mm.
is I've got to have a certain inseam or something in order to run a specific time. And so that would be like a limited possibilities play. Limited resources is typically money, but it could be time. So I can go faster. I know I could run faster, but I've got a family, and there's just not going to be the time. When really maybe Gabe, the marathon coach, knows well. Technically, nutrition can play a large part in this, and so you and I have solutions in our mind for these problems. So I think we have to start with not even the physical problem, which may be marathon time, but a myth that is powering that external problem.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like to dial it back to like see that example and see how it plays out. Now,
Yeah.
I know you also talk about starting with strategic uncertainty instead of
Okay.
authority claims. So, can you dive into what that is and why does strategic uncertainty work better? How can we apply that to our messaging?
Okay, so the most tempting, and I can't remember last time I didn't see this somewhere on a website. So for me, this is a way for us to really improve together. So when we visit a website, and let's say you're a runner, Gabe, and you visit a website, and you've never been here, but you've done a Google search and you found, a blog, a site, or whatever. And I'm curious. At the top of the site, it says, "Welcome, you are in the right place," or "Welcome, marathon person, you're in the right place." I'm curious if it's just me. What are your thoughts when you're reading a headline like that?
Well, my first initial thought when you said that is, okay, I'm a marathon runner. Why am I in the right place?
Okay, yeah, so there's a lack of context there, and maybe they're that clever. I think sometimes it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. So what ends up happening is we just have, if you're struggling with X or Y, you're in the right place. And so it's like we want to hook attention in that way, but what we can end up doing actually is creating objection points in the minds of our listeners, because we think, you don't know me. I just got here. Like, this is a website, or at best it's an AI chat window. You don't actually know what I gave and am struggling with. And so what I like to identify these challenges in a couple of different areas, and I call it strategic uncertainty, because I think it's great to have a label. So let me start with I'm going to be uncertain on purpose. And I actually picked this up from the sales world. And maybe that's worth mentioning, is part of the background here is trying to take sales principles and bring them into the marketing space. So
Mhm.
maybe it would help if I defined sales and marketing, because we can all define those words however we like. And no worries if someone wants to define these terms differently. But to me, marketing is a one to many message. Even if it's a sales page, even if it's a checkout page, if multiple people can be on that checkout page at the same time, in my mind, that's marketing world. Whereas sales is, there's feedback. You and I are having a conversation, and it's one on one. And in the sales world, there are things, there are strategies that people do that I think can be brought into the marketing space that just maybe aren't all the time, or at least are not widely understood. So one of these things is this idea of being uncertain early in the call, trying to be super curious. Okay, that's obvious if you and I are talking and we can say, let's ask some questions, let's do some follow-up questions, but we're on a marketing page, so how can we do that? And so one way that we can do that is to avoid these claims. We want to establish some kind of trust early, and the way that we tend to do it outside of the sales world is to do this with claims, credentials, or cliches like "you're in the right place." Some alternates
Mhm.
for that would be to open up with something metric based, or something story backed. So here are a couple of examples. So instead of "I'm the leading expert in consultant messaging optimization," here's something better. "After analyzing the websites of over 200 consultants, we've identified three common patterns that separate high converting sites from the rest." So now we're just sharing data rather than saying, "I'm credentialed," or claiming authority. That would be like an authority claim. The classic is, you're in the right place to fix your broken websites, something like that. If your website's broken, you're in the right place. Maybe instead of going that direction, if you're seeing high traffic but low conversions, what we've learned from working with consultants like Bob might surprise you. So we're going to try to hook attention there, open a story gap, but try to stay. I'm suggesting that maybe we don't. If our ears hear our mouths say, or on the page, "You're in the right place," we should be careful. Maybe on thin ice. All right, you guys in the listenership, disagree with me if you want. I'm not judging you if you've got that on your website. I'm just trying to suggest that we can learn things from other worlds, and this would be a classic sales play. Is very early in the conversation to be completely uncertain about whether we can help.
Yeah. Well, I also think as you're talking, that hook really matters because if someone lands on your website, they may only be there for a few seconds. So we really have to make sure that they key in and know that it's the right website for them.
Mm.
So I think that that first part is really, really important.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have what 7 seconds or something like that in order to make to get someone leaning in. And we've got to admit, when we go to websites, I don't know, Gabe, do you go to at least one website each day? I don't know how many you go to, maybe
At
two,
least, probably. Yeah.
probably 10, maybe 50, right? So we're already leaning back when we come to the website. We're skeptical, right? So we've got to reverse that, and we start telling people they're in the right place. Realtors used to call these objection points whenever we were looking at houses a long time ago. Heather and I were like, we want to make sure they're always, we want to be removing objection points, Jason. And so I feel like we can introduce unknowingly objection points in our prospects' mind. So this is one strategy. You don't have to, agree with that, but just by way of keeping an open mind, a little strategic uncertainty doesn't hurt early in the funnel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know you talk a little bit about questions versus conditionals. Tell us the difference between those and which do you recommend?
Okay, yeah. So weird, and I not to keep putting you in the hot seat here, Gabe, but
I
as
don't mind.
you say, you go great. So you go to at least two websites a day. What is your mind doing when you're reading prose, a paragraph versus a question? Is there something different that's happening in your own mind when you see a sentence that ends in a period versus a sentence that ends in a question mark?
Hmm. Well, a period to me may I'm an editor by trade too. So a
Okay.
period to me means a command essentially or a
Okay.
statement.
Mm,
So that would help me to kind of go, oh, okay. They know what they're talking about, or yep, that's me, or I can kind of see myself in that. A question might make me question, is that me? Is that where I'm struggling? Whatnot? I do like questions, like, they do get me thinking a lot,
mhm.
but yeah, I would say maybe it's the difference between this is reality, this is it with a period, and a question making me wonder, am I struggling with that or not?
That is a perfect answer, first of all, Gabe. Yes. So in my head, there's a world between the statement ending in a period and the statement ending in a question mark, and that's what want to introduce here in a second. But first, I'm not against questions, and we should can and should have questions on our page. No problem there. What I'm suggesting is that a question is a pause. It's when we want our reader to stop reading. We put a question mark at the end of that statement because most statements can be phrased either way, as we'll see. And so, high on the page, a question, no big deal. Maybe a subheading ending in a question as a title isn't bad. If every subheading is ending in a question, or we're asking questions in the body of our paragraphs, what we're really asking our readers to do is just slow down. And like I mentioned, at least I come to websites leaning back. I'm not leaning forward. And so, in the spirit of trying to get people to have a bunch of micro yeses going down the page, I'm just suggesting that our questions should be simple yes, no. So it's an easy yes. So if we ask our reader to pause and it's strategic, it's not for long. But more often that we instead phrase it as a conditional. So conditional gets us gives us this ability, excuse me, to ask a question without causing the pause. So
Mm,
here's how that can work. So, would you like me to share some examples, Gabe? Did you have any
absolutely.
feedback there? Okay. So are you tired of wasting time on marketing that doesn't work? That's a question. It's a simple yes. Nothing wrong with that. But we can rephrase it. If you're tired of wasting time on marketing that doesn't work, there's a pattern we've discovered among successful consultants. So this is that statement of fact, and it allows the reader to continue down the page without pausing. I'm not saying we should have no questions. I think it's good to mix it up,
Mhm.
but when I'm looking at websites and I'm just reading them as an outsider, as that guy leaning back in reviewing websites, this is a pattern that I see that I think we think we're being clever and what's actually happening is we're slowing the reader's brain down. Another would be, do you struggle to communicate your value to potential clients? That's a question.
Mhm.
Rephrasing it would be, if you struggle to communicate your value to potential clients, you might be interested in what we found after analyzing loads of consultant websites, something like that. So these are ways that we can not avoid questions continually, but reframe them as sentences when we're really just trying to continue those micro yeses and keep it. Yeah, you know what? I do struggle. So if I do, well, then what? Now I'm leaning in versus kind of leaning back, asking myself, I don't know. Do I struggle? I think I'm pretty good at communicating. So we can end up getting a no when really we want a yes. I'm just saying be careful of question marks, but there's a strategy to get around the question mark if it's helpful.
Okay, very good. I'm just like, boom, boom, boom. We have so much to cover, and I want to cover as much as we can. Rescue focused language versus agency focused language. What is this? What does that mean?
Okay, let's buzz through these. This is my end. This is sort of so. This is once again, team. If you guys disagree, and I live in the Mid Atlantic, so we say you guys. I don't know
I do too.
what you do. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's all the way to Colorado. All right, cool.
Well, I'm
But
northwest, where I born and raised Minnesota, right? So like you guys is
oh yeah, okay. So what in Minnesota? What do they say for how do I don't want to use the word. We have a carbonated beverage.
you mean pop.
Is that what it is? Do you call that pop?
Yes. It's
Okay.
not Coke and it's not soda.
Right. Okay. Okay. So around where I grew up, we called them soft drinks,
Oh,
and so I'd hear pop or soda, and I just have this 1950s vibe. I love it. I just don't think I can authentically say pop. I feel like someone would call me on that. But you're right. Further south from where I'm from, everything's Coke. Like you hand me a Coke, and what we really mean is Seven Up, and there was definitely some of that where we were. So thankfully, in Minnesota, they didn't have that problem, Gabe. I'm glad to hear it. So yeah, so regarding rescue focused versus agency focused language, again, disagree if you like. I end up leaning back when someone tells me I deserve something. It's sort of like that earlier authority claim, or tell me I'm in the right place, or tell me I deserve something. Like, you know what? We all have challenges. We're all pressing on up the narrow path, hopefully. Especially as believers, entering by the narrow gate has a specific connotation for people of biblical mindsets, and as we're all walking that out, there are challenges. But when someone tells me that I deserve something, even if I think, well, maybe that's true, I'm leaning back, Gabe. I'm already like, you know, I'm not so sure. You don't know me. Like, this isn't an actual sales conversation. This is a marketing page that everybody reads. So everybody that comes here deserves whatever it is that we're saying. So that phrase, "you deserve," I'm classifying, and there are other varieties of it, I'm sure, as rescue focused language. Like, I've got my cape on. You're a victim dangling off the edge of a skyscraper. You deserve to be up here with me. Let me fly in, grab you, pull you up from hanging over the edge, and set your feet on solid ground. And I don't think that serves our prospect to think of our prospect like that. I like to think of this as agency focus. So when a person is coming to the website, this is a capable person. They may just not have the same information that I have, but this person is certainly capable. So instead of maybe you deserve to have more clients, Gabe, like I can use that language on a website and people do. Maybe you've worked hard to develop your expertise and you're ready to attract clients who recognize that value. Or you're committed to growing your practice and your website can become a powerful tool in that journey. Or lastly, you're capable of making informed marketing decisions when presented with evidence based approaches. So I'm projecting capability onto someone in the language versus, you know, you deserve better. I mean, it sounds so, you know, I grew up in the 1980s and it just reminds me of these infomercials from the 80s. Like, you deserve to not be struggling with this thing, and it just it rings in. Okay, so team, if you're out there and you're using you deserves, you know, you deserve, yeah, those phrases on languages on your websites. No judgment here. I'm just trying to offer an optional mindset shift, and once the mindset shift is there, these other patterns will sort of emerge. So
mm,
that's the agency focus versus rescue language tip, and it's something that it's just in my own head that I've noticed on websites as I'm reading, and it gives me a certain feeling. I thought maybe there are others that also experience that.
yeah, it kind of reminds me as you were talking and thinking about like the biblical version of you deserve because we don't deserve anything. But it
Mm.
reminds me of teaching someone how to fish. It's not doing it for them. It's not like
Mhm.
you should be able to have this. No, I'm going to teach you how to be able to do that. It's going to take the work. You don't deserve it. You have to earn it, right? But that's kind of what I thought about when you were talking.
Earned is a beautiful sub for deserved. That's just that's a pro tip there, Gabe, that you just said. Yeah, so you deserve, you've earned. And if we can't legitimately say that on the website, we may not want to. We may want to just strike the language. But I love here, have fish versus let me teach you to fish. So
Mhm.
that's a great analogy.
Love it. Okay, so what is your three-phase roadmap for sales copy?
Okay, yep. So in and anyone listening who's familiar with Donald Miller and Storybrand, certainly a book that changed my own path back in
Mhm.
2017 when I read that book, is familiar with his three-step plan. Don didn't make that up. Our minds love threes. We love beginning, middle, and end. So what I like to do is come up with that for a client in the web copy. So remember, we're not talking about a Shopify store where we're selling some sort of commodity. We're trying to sell something that is transformational in the case of this sort of sales language. So including a three-phase roadmap in my head is super important. Well, what are the phases? And so I'd like to suggest that your phases, team, can be prepare, execute, support. So, how is a person going to prepare? Coming into the program, these are the steps we're going to take. Then we're going to execute, we're going to deliver the transformation, but we're not abandoning you there. No, no. If it's our marathon runner coach, you've run your first marathon, the support doesn't stop. There are going to be emails, live calls, there's going to be recovery involved. We're going to be here to help you. So pretty much any coaching practice or consulting practice can be broken into prepare, execute, support. And now this person is we're sort of dealing with these, I call this inoculating against the future. If you think about after the program, this person is feeling maybe alone or concerned they're going to feel alone. And this is a way of doing that inoculation against the future is to have a three-phase prepare, execute, support plan.
Very good. I love it. Okay, easy question. Well, I don't know if it's easy, but first, second, or third person in sales copy, what's best?
It depends. So yeah, I like the idea, like most, of talking to the prospect rather than talking about ourselves. Most of us are going to do that naturally, hopefully. But there is a time when I'd like to recommend that we consider using first person. I know someone's the about page. Well, maybe, but more specifically, the calls to action. So when someone's about to click something, they're in their mind in the first person. They're no longer reading language that's coming to us. They're reading language that's coming out of their own mind. And so when it's the very reason actually that we've named our company Rewrite My Site, because I could picture the button that that person is going to click. In fact, when it all started, it was rewritemysite.ai. I'm thinking this AI is going to rewrite their site. This would be a command to the AI. So all the call to action buttons on my own, we drink our own grape juice. I think Salesforce calls us we drink our own champagne. I don't know how the folks are feeling about that word. So we drink our own grape juice around here, and we put rewrite my site on the button. So when someone's ready to rewrite their site, they click the button that says, yes, I want to rewrite my site. So I'm going to suggest that we consider first person on buttons, but second person most other places.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I when I'm thinking, and I also think about like keywords. So if I'm typing something in, I'm going to type in how do I fix my something or other. So when it kind of like those buttons help me if it says my or
Oh, that's perfect.
I or something like that. Like okay, this is for me, right? Instead of you. Just yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that is really strong. You mean when you're searching for marathon hamstring recovery, you're not searching how do you fix your hamstring after a marathon? Yeah,
Right.
obviously
Exactly.
not, right? So, oh, that's yeah, perfect. So yeah, maybe there's an SEO bump there. I feel like just when we're clear, the SEO takes care of itself typically.
Hmm.
Google has AI now too. They can read our websites and our focus could be clarity in that way. Yeah, that's
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, can you share a little bit more about what you when you're talking about a solid testimonial framework? What does that look like?
most people are going to say let's have a before and after, like a testimonial is before and after, or something, even like a one liner. We'll see one liners and these can be impactful, and I'm not saying you have to always follow this, but this testimonial framework I'm about to share can actually serve as interview talk tracks when we're gathering testimonials. So we're not trying to make stuff up, or we're not trying to put pressure on our clients to write in this way, but we can serve them. And I'll get to that in a minute. So a standard testimonial might sound like Jason's framework is amazing. Highly recommend. Gabe's marathon training is irreplaceable. Highly recommend. And those are great. That is social proof. That is better than nothing. I like to suggest that, like usual, there are three steps, Gabe. And those three steps are relatable tension. So this is, we're going to build tension. Remember, story is building and releasing tension. If we go with that definition, so how can we build relatable tension, something that someone else is going to experience? I was really struggling with my marathon times. I would do all this practice and then get to race day, which is, I'm not a marathoner, Gabe. You are. I'm told is a celebration of our training. So I've done the training. I'm going to race day. Now it's a celebration of our training. The time is the same, or even worse, it's higher. Now there's relatable tension. So step two would be transformative resolution. Now, for someone who is a counselor, this can't it isn't always so easy to measure. So normally this can and should be measurable if possible. So in a marathon time, we can make it measurable. Something like then, oh, and also I'd want to, because it's transformative resolution, I'd want to focus a little bit on the process that got there too. So I joined Gabe's program. Blown away, first of all, way more in there than what she mentioned on the features list. So I'm talking about the program. But here's the important thing. I went to and ran my next marathon and dropped my time by 3 minutes, something I did not think was possible. All right, so there's the transformative resolution, step two. And then, so already we have two steps that weren't in the original, except maybe Jason's framework is amazing, but there's nothing measurable in that standard testimonial type. And then step three is authentic endorsement. Therefore, I recommend, what are you waiting for? Join Gabe's Marathon Coaching now. These are the three steps. And more importantly, we want to be able to guide people in interviews to deliver this for us. So now that we've got these ideas, so team, if you can hold in your mind relatable tension, transformative resolution, authentic endorsement, I don't think I have to tell you how to interview your people to get that down. And so, what I'd like to suggest to put a bow on this section is that we say, hey, Peggy, so glad you were able to crush that marathon time. Remember, I'm here for you. You're in the support phase now, so I'm not going anywhere. Could we jump on a call and talk about your race? And we get on the call, we serve Peggy during this call, and along the way, we extract phrases from Peggy. And then at the end, say, Peggy, would you be open if I wrote using your words a testimonial, let you approve it, polish it, write it however you want, and send it back to me? Now it's not a heavy lift. Like, hey, Peggy, I'm really looking for you to to use relatable tension, transformative resolution, and authentic endorsement in a testimonial. Probably overwhelming. But once again, those are some ideas for when you get to the social proof section of the page, how to structure at least one of your testimonials in this way to help, once again, inoculate against the future about what your program is going to be like.
Yeah, I love that. Testimonials are so powerful. Stories do sell, but it's, capturing the right things, the things that are really going to resonate with somebody and that really have that hook and the transformation and those types of things. Now, I do want to, as we wind down, actually talk a little bit about AI and how that works
Okay.
with sales copy because your whole business is rewrite my site. So that is geared from through an AI tool that you have created to really help with creating marketing messages and creating websites that really are appealing, that are persuasive. But one thing that I've noticed is that many marketers do worry about AI generated copy. They think that it will sound generic or off brand. But I
Mm,
know you also argue that obsessing over minor word choices might be missing the bigger picture. Like for instance, one word I really don't like seeing is unlock because I just know it's chat GPT. Okay. Like I don't like that word, but there's certain ones that I'm like, "Grr," I cringe. But how should we rethink our expectations of AI in messaging?
First, I totally agree with you. There are certain words that are triggers, even for me personally, and I'm using AI and coding for it every day. So it's there are that's not a. I don't want to dismiss that concern. So yes, if we're seeing unlock too often, or crucial too often, or game changer too, I mean there's specific tell words that we can remove. I guess my if the takeaway here, since our time is running a little low, would be that sales can be formalized. In fact, it's if no one's been through a sales program, could I share a little about what I learned after a
Yeah.
100-week sales program, Gabe? I wasn't planning on doing this, but maybe it's relevant.
Mhm.
So I came from an engineering background, and I honestly thought that salespeople were just, can I say this out on a recording? Folks that couldn't hack engineering and went to sales. Did I just say that out loud? That's a really judgy thing to think. But it wasn't because of the profession. It was because they were asking so many questions, and I thought, if this person is coming to sell me something, shouldn't this person be doing the sharing? This is a presentation that I'm sitting through or whatever it is. And it wasn't like that. It was after going through a 100-week corporate sales training experience that I discovered that the salespeople were actually following a process, a very effective process, and it had nothing to do with whether or not, and many of them, probably most of them, went through engineering school just like I did. They just went through another process so that they could learn to understand what the decision drivers were. And it turns out that sales is structured in this way. And so that's what I learned. And maybe I'll do some sort of blog series at some point, because I actually wrote a 100-page summary of that training in like a book form. Gabe, there
Mm.
was so much. So the takeaway, without getting into the very specifics there, and maybe in some future, when you and I may talk again on your podcast or something, we can talk around, as a teaser, some of the very specific, like the three biggest bullet points I learned during that training, because there were those things. Definitely, it was hard to miss. What was not hard to miss is also was the fact that this was a process, a soup to nuts, followable, repeatable process that we could follow. So I'd like to suggest that in our marketing, we can do the same thing, except that our brains can't hold 100 pages. And that was just sales. That wasn't even marketing. It's hard for the brain. The reason it was 100 weeks, there was a lot of repetition in there, believe it or not. You couldn't sit through like 10 weeks of this stuff and just have it. The other 90 weeks, we're trying to get our minds to contextualize it, to remap things in our brains. And so, what doesn't have that problem, Gabe? Yeah, you guessed it, AI. It doesn't have that problem. It's holding 30 million books in its context right now. The problem is that 30 million, those 30 million books end up working against us. And so it ends up sounding like an encyclopedia because it is an encyclopedia. So I thought, okay, timeout. What if we could take the marketing process, which is, and I focus lower in funnels, like on an offer page or a sales page, and structure that. Now, it turns out, this is the beauty of this whole part of our segment here. We want to have a brand voice. I don't want to learn about marathoning from Peggy. I want to learn about marathoning from Gabe, because I like the way Gabe writes. I like your blogs. I like your emails. But when we're on the checkout page, and so I'm not a hipster, I'm from Generation X, but uh, I looked up some like hipster like words just so I could have some examples here for us. If I get to the checkout page and went to enter my credit card, and it said anything other than credit card number, if it was like swipey number or plastic cash ID, so I was playing a little bit with Grok. Are you gonna enter your credit card number, Gabe, into something that says plastic cash ID? I'm just curious.
I would say no.
I would question. I like, okay, I see. Like the kind of the brand is sort of spilling over onto the checkout form. I guess I trust this person, but I'm questioning. I'm starting to lean back. And what I'd like to suggest is, the further we get to that credit card number being entered, the more clear and the less brandy it is time to be. So just hold that insurgent thought in your mind, team, and consider that having an exceptional brand voice is important in emails and in high funnel activities, but having a trust voice is important low. And a trust
Mm.
voice, thankfully, usually sounds the same way. And because it sounds the same way, this is something we can train AI to emulate. And so this was sort of the controlling idea of my project, is like, okay, wait a minute. Sales is a process. It is formulaic. Having a brand voice super low in the funnel isn't that important. Why don't I spend some time? Well, time turned into Gosh, I think I personally have got 3,000 hours in the project, Gabe. That's not including Heather's time or my son Colson's. So this is the beauty of AI. So long way to say, yes, it will use words like unlock, but to me, that is holding the 100-week sales training is the hard part. Holding the, the I don't know, dozens and dozens of pages that I've written to train Sherpa in my mind at the same time, and I wrote it, is the hard part. Striking a word unlock is the easy part. Okay, maybe that's out kicking my coverage because I wrote rewrite my site, but I've been personally encouraged, energized by what AI has been able to do for offer pages for people who don't want to try to hold all of these rules and tips that I just gave and a whole lot more. So, in summary, in closing, the outline for Sherpa is over 200 lines, just the outline. So we just
Mm,
covered, I think, 8 lines, something like
yeah.
that. There's a lot, and we know this because there's a new marketing book every year. But what if we could take the best parts of all these marketing frameworks, like we were saying in the pre-call, there's table stakes to get and become a marketing. I know a gambling term. My family doesn't gamble. It's just a just a term that's out there. But to be able to play, you got to have certain. We got to be able to identify the target prospect and the problem and dot dot dot. But then there are these distinctives. So what if we could lift the distinctives from all these marketing frameworks, put these things in an order, set all the rules so that it's not breaking rules, and have it do all of this stuff, and we just sort of feed it a basic business context, and then it can go through a series of prompts at the end of the day and build out this sales page for us. Well, now we've got something that's at the bottom of the funnel that if we want to leave social media, we can go focus on longer term, yes, evergreen relationships instead of this constant churn trying to push more and more leads into something that just isn't working for us. So that's the soapbox on, would you consider not dismissing AI out of hand? I've been, like I said, energized by what it's been able to do.
Yeah, that was well said. So, and actually, I was very against AI for a very long time, and mainly because in the beginning, Chat GPT just sounded very robotic.
Mm,
But it's come a long way, and when you know how to do it well, it is. I'm like, oh, I'm having fun with this. It can help me create outlines. It can help me with these pages. It can do a lot of these things that I
yes.
was very obstinate about before. Now, as a final question, I'd love to hear someone who wants a quick win, what's something they can do in the next 7 days to improve their messaging?
Oh, I love how you reverse that on me. Okay, so the quick win, what Gabe just did there is the quick win is part of Sherpa messaging. It's part of that inoculate against the future process. And so she's asking me the same thing. All right, Jason, so give the team a quick win. How could I do that for you guys? So I'd say a quick win would be to all right, so let's do this. I'd like to give you a model to think of your messaging through, and this could be your quick win. So, in studying all of these marketing frameworks and doing all the reading, I mean, over 1,000. I mean, I've listened to 1,000 podcasts, thousands of podcasts, like most people probably have, but a good 1,000 of those are marketing podcasts. A pattern has emerged, and I think it's a pattern that we as humans can actually hold in our head, not all the hundreds of steps and all the things. And that pattern is hook attention, build trust, and inspire action. And that pattern repeats. So if we're on a blog post, we want to hook attention, we want to build trust, and we want to inspire action. And the action may be download my lead magnet. Now they're reading the lead magnet. Hook attention, build trust, inspire action. Maybe to go watch my webinar. Hook attention in the webinar, build trust, inspire action. Inspire action might be go to the checkout page or the sales page or whatever. Same thing on the page, same thing at checkout. This pattern repeats. So action just leads to the next hook attention step. So hook attention at the top, build trust in the middle, and inspire action at the bottom of your mental funnel. I think we can all remember those 3 steps, Gabe. So maybe we could leave it there.